Hey, I'm Stephen Peterson, and this is my scholarly critique on Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. I'm going to be doing my scholarly critique on Beverly A. Hume's Managing Madness and Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. And in this article, she uses two texts. She uses The Yellow Wallpaper by Gilman and Why I Wrote the Yellow Wallpaper, also by Gilman. Now, in Beverly A. Hume's Managing Madness and Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, she explains that the yellow wallpaper is about the misdiagnosis because of gender-based stereotyping and the effects that the patriarchal society has on mad women and the downward spiral of self-harm and depression with human contact and healthy non-human contact, not locked in a room with no leave for months. She shows us how the culture of her time would not accept that anything was wrong with her mentally and just told her to exist, to sleep, to eat, and to activate your brain for no more than 2 hours a day. This rest cure proves to do nothing but let these illnesses fester in one's mind and get even worse. The patriarchal society downplays the role of a woman and thinks that women don't really know what's going on, or they exaggerate everything and they always want something to be going wrong. The biggest fault here is on the doctors who judged her in her gender and didn't medically treat her. They just saw that she was a woman and saw that these stereotypes applied to her, and they said, there's nothing wrong with you, you just need to rest. The other half of the story shows the downward spiral of the mental illness without the things of a person needs to function regularly. We see comparison to Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat to see how the narrator has no sympathy for anyone, including itself. We see in The Yellow Wallpaper how being confined to the borders of this culture has placed on her a room with no leaves and bars on the window. It only makes her mental illnesses grow worse. However, at the same time, she becomes liberated by the illnesses because through them she is allowed to creep wherever she pleases, and this is an allegory to how she shows the embrace of these gender stereotypes. But it comes at the cost of her not being her own person anymore. I am going to talk more about the effects that it has on the mind as a woman, how the yellow wallpaper shows us the inside mind of this woman. The Yellow Wallpaper is a story that shows the mind of the woman who is mistreated by her patriarchal society and left to the mercy of mental illnesses, confined in the borders that society has put on her, and the effects when this gender-biased stereotype is rejected and accepted. I am going to be focusing more on the mind of the woman that we see in The Yellow Wallpaper. Now, my only critique to Hume's article is that she focuses a lot on the misdiagnosis. It's the society's fault that she's being treated like this, and it's the society's fault that all these things are happening. And while that's true, I, however, think that the story shows a lot more about her mind. Because we read the story through the woman's diary. And through this diary, we get to see her thoughts, and we get to see how things changing and how her illnesses progress, and sometimes there's better times, sometimes there's not so good times in her situation, and how she views the world around her and things that are going on. It's our lens into her world, and so that's what I'm specifically focusing on her world, the things that are going on in her mind. Now, the first thing I really want to point out is the room itself. You see, she gives us a tour in the very first part of the story. She gives us a tour of the entire house. However, things start changing in the room. The room doesn't really feel like it's the same room when she first described it to us to the end of the book, when things are moving and she feels like there's demon-like things going on in the room. If I was to go on Zillow and look on a house in my area, and if I was going to look at it every day for 4 months, I don't really expect the description of the rooms in this house to change. I expect them to stay exactly the same. But that's not what's happening here. You see, she progresses. Things change in her life. Her mental illnesses progressively get worse as the story goes on. And that's all things that we can see through our lens in her mind. So that's why I only critique Hume's article into being not about the misdiagnosis. I don't put the fault on the doctors and the men in the story for her having mental illnesses. I put the blame on them for the things that happened during her mental illnesses and maybe amplifying things so that they get worse. No, this story is all about mental illnesses. It's not about the misdiagnosis, it's about the illness itself. In a way, you could say that the illness is the main character, especially how by the end of the story, the illness literally becomes the main character, or really the main character becomes the illness. But it's the same thing. The illness is what's taking center stage in this story. It's what controls everything going on here. So the room, again, the room is like its own character and it changes. We see it at the beginning how it is just a room. It is a room with a bed, it is a room with windows on the bars. She said it was a nursery, but then the previous owners maybe changed it into a gym for the kids to run around and they would kick balls, and that's why there are bars up. To me, it paints the picture that it's really like a prison, and that's what it is. It's to hold her inside this place that she can't leave. The bars are what very clearly paints that picture. I can remember a time when I went to visit a prison cell, and I very remember that there were bars on the windows that you can't leave. It's something that stuck with me for that same kind of imagery that she's using here. Now, things happen in this room. We start seeing that there are claw marks on the floor. We start seeing that the shapes in the wallpaper start moving. We start seeing that the wallpaper itself is no longer the same wallpaper. It's like a mold. It's like a fungus. It's something that's growing and spreading and taking over the entire room. And to me, this is showing me the illness. This is showing me how the illness is slowly taking control of her entire mind. She's left in the confines of her mind by herself, and the illness starts to take over. And we see that through the wallpaper. And now, as you might be led to believe, as she takes the wallpaper, she's taking over and taking control of this disease, but that's actually the opposite that happens. But at the end of the story, when we see that this woman has taken off all the wallpaper in the room, this illness has completely taken over. She says that the woman has now left the wallpaper, and that's her, and it's crazy. Now, the interesting perspective that we are given in the story is the same as what Hume explained to us in her article. It is that she is accepting this gender stereotype of now she is given freedom by this mental illness to be able to go where she wants to. In the story, we're starting being introduced to these women in the wallpaper that are able to creep. She uses the word creep as in a way that she's walking around and going to these places. And by the end of the story, she becomes these women that can creep. And it's liberating to her. She's given a type of freedom in it. However, it does come at a very major cost. She is now no longer her own person. She is controlled by this thing, this mental illness that she has going on in her. And so that is the effects of when these gender stereotypes are accepted, these stereotypes that women are just crazy, every woman is mad, women just need to rest, nothing is going on, they just want things to be going on because they need problems and they need things that are going on so that they can complain about. That is what this patriarchal stereotypical society is placing on them. These are the borders that she is confined to in the room, and the effects of that is what we see, how she can't leave and she hates it and she wants to leave. She does not like the room. She is very clear that the place she's at she hates. That is her stance at the very beginning of the story, and that is how we know her true feelings about it, because the mental illness is still not a very key player in the story yet. So she hates the room, and then it's only by the end of the story where she almost seems like she likes the room. She doesn't want anyone else to know what's going on with the wallpaper. You know, those kind of things are happening, and the room becomes a place that she almost wants to be. She wants to be able to figure out what's going on with this wallpaper. It's her thing. And then by the end of it, she's completely taken over. So that is why I agree with Hume's article in Managing Mental Illness in the Yellow Wallpaper. I agree with her aspects of these patriarchal society placing borders on her and the accepting of the gender stereotypes that were around in that time when the story was written. However, I say that this story more focuses on the mind and the mental illness, more on whose fault and the misdiagnosis was. Because in Hume's article, she makes that very clear that the fault is on these people who have misdiagnosed her, and it's the society's fault. However, I don't see it that way. I see it as just, it's explaining mental illness and what that looks like to people who really can understand it.